As much as I love using Save the Cat and the 3-act story structure, when it comes to planning a new novel, I usually tend to use the 7 plot point system that was popularized by Dan Wells. And that's why I wanted to walk you through the Hunger Games using that strategy when it comes to outlining your novel, because I think it's really important, at least for me, when I start a new novel, to not only look at the 3 acts, what's going to be where, but also to make sure that I have an as exciting and beginning and ending as possible, that I have a great impact. And that is what I think the 7 plot point system actually does. It makes sure that we move from being somewhere to going somewhere that is completely different from where we started out, but not in a way that it does not make sense. We still have to walk, do the progress and stuff like that. That's why today we're using the Hunger Games and going through how to use the 7 plot point system. I've made a video about this before, but in that video I actually didn't go through how you plan it the right way according to the system, because you're not just going to plan it hook, plot point 1, pinch point, midpoint. That's not the way we plan it using the system. Instead, we're going to do it in a different order to make sure that we get the best story that we can potentially write. And remember, when you are planning a story using the system, it's okay. It's, all the plot points and stuff like that, it's going to sound super cringe. And that's okay, because the reader won't notice once you've written the story. And in the outlining stage, it's fine that it does, okay? Before you start outlining, you need to have a few things that you've already figured out. And these are who your main characters are, what the main conflict of the story or theme is, and where the story is set. This is super important. You need to have this background before you even launch into this, because otherwise it won't make sense. And to build a story, you need to have a story and you need to know what it's about. So I assume that you already know this, okay? And when it comes to planning the story, we will begin at the end. The reason for this is because the entire story actually leads up to the resolution or the climax of the story. That's why it's super important to know where we're going. And in the Hunger Games, the entire plot leads up to Katniss. She not only survives the Hunger Games, she and Peeta survives it together, which is a sort of rebellion towards the capital. And this is super important because now we know what's going to happen and where we're going. We know that it's not only about survival, but it's also about rebellion. It's about staying strong. And the resolution in the Hunger Games, it's not only external, not only the fact that she survives, rebels against the capital, it's also internal, because at the end of the Hunger Games, she decides she's no longer just a pawn in the games of Snow and the capital. She's her own being, and she shows that she can survive and she can do it. So she actually, transcends and reaches new potential. And perfect. Now that we have the resolution, we're going to go back and look at the beginning. So basically, the beginning of the story is the opposite of the resolution. So at the end of the Hunger Games, Katniss is super strong. This means that at the beginning, she's going to be weak and she's going to be a nobody. And, at the beginning of the Hunger Games, Katniss, she's a poor girl from District 12. She barely has any food. She is fighting to survive. And she's no one to count on. And there's nothing to indicate that she can become what she will become at this point. Okay, so now that we got the hook done, we're going to look at the midpoint. And the reason why is because it's in the middle of the 2 states that we've been figuring out so far. It's usually when the character goes from, from reacting to acting. Something huge is going to happen, and it's so important that the progression follows for us as readers to believe this. And this is usually like something will happen that makes the character decide to take action here. In the Hunger Games, I would say that this is when Rue dies and Katniss decides to actually start not just surviving the Hunger Games, but actually starts to rebel, and she becomes this symbol. It's such an important episode of the book, to be honest. So that is what I would say is the midpoint of the Hunger Games. Now you think about what it could be something this significant in your story. And after looking at the midpoint, we're going back to plot point 1. This is the bridge between the hook and the midpoint. We need something believable here to like push the story forward. This usually is some sort of like conflict that is introduced. Maybe it's a call to adventure or something like that. And of course, in the Hunger Games, it's when Prim gets called upon for the reaping and for the Hunger Games, and Katniss volunteers to take her place. This throws Katniss on a like real journey. This is like the entire story. So that is plot point 1 in the Hunger Games. And you know, in Harry Potter, it's when he finds out that he's a wizard. And it's usually something that when we like change the surrounding and change the world that we're in, we go from the safe and known into the unknown. So take a beat and think about what that could be in your story. After that, we take a look at plot point 2, and plot point 2 is sort of the mirror of plot point 1, but it's of course at the end of the story, and this takes us from the midpoint to the resolution. So it also needs something big, needs to be something big, some kind of shift that makes us go all the way. And this is usually also like the final thing that the main character needs to be able to solve whatever problem they're in. And make sure that it is your main character that does this. So it's not like Deus Ex Machina or something like that, because that would not be a satisfying ending for the reader. So make sure that it's something that your character does. And don't introduce some wizard did it or something stupid like that, because that is just lazy. And this is also one of the reasons why we outline in like before we start writing, because that way we won't end up in trouble, and we won't yeah, I don't know, we won't like have unsolvable problems, I guess. Another example of plot point 2 could be like the power is in you or whatever. And in the Hunger Games, I guess this is when Katniss decides that if they can't have what they want, so if they can't win together, they decide to eat the berries, and they would rather die together than not at all. So this is when she decides that it's better to say no and not be a pawn, and like stick in the route that she's already decided to take, instead of becoming suppressed and giving in to the capital. And after this, we look at the 2 pinch points that we haven't looked at already. So both pinch point 1 and pinch point 2 are supposed to be things that happen that pinches the character, that makes them suffer, makes them doubt themselves. And like pinch point 1 is usually something that reinforces the inner light that the character still has. And it really applies pressure. You know, something goes wrong, something happens, and this forces the character to take some sort of action. And during pinch point 1, we're usually introduced to the villain as well. So if you have some sort of villain, this is the perfect timing to introduce them. And in pinch point 2, this is again another place to introduce some sort of pressure. Maybe the mentor dies, or maybe, you know, a plan fails, something goes terribly wrong. In the Hunger Games, this is when they say that there can't be 2 winners. And, you know, both Peeta and Katniss faces this troubling truth. Like everything they've done, everything they've planned for feels like it's failing. And it's supposed to be hard, it's supposed to be threatening. But yeah, as you know, because you've already planned the other steps, they will make it through. And this is basically how you plan your story using the 7 plot point system. I love using it. I have usually have post-it notes with these written and plan them out. And I think that it's just a great way to make sure that the story has the sort of progression that I wanted to have, and that it, like, all the plot points and plot turns, that they make sense and they're not just there to be dramatic. They're there for a reason, and they're there to make sure that the character actually, grows and is on their way towards where they're going. So yeah, that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope that you enjoy this series that has had Hunger Games as the example. Thank you so much. And if you want me to make other videos with examples like this, let me know in the comments. Happy writing. I hope you guys have a productive summer, and I will talk to you next week. Bye.